Online?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people online?
Yes.
Yeah, there are people online.
Great. 8 people online.
Oh, there's quite a few.
Now I'm getting nervous.
So please.
This is how we work.
Varför du upp
Ja.
den här länken på vår hemsida?
Kan du skicka?
Nej, det får jag inspela.
Ja, det ser
Det var börja då.
Ja.
Hey. Should I say welcome?
Yes.
Why not?
I'm happy to be here at the presentation day, and the reason for having the presentation is, in fact, to rehearse a little bit on what I'm going to say in a conference where I have a paper accepted. So this will be you're perfectly fine to ask questions if you have any, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can. But if it takes too long, I'll probably go on anyway. We'll see what happens. It's a interactive seminar, I guess. So the title is Teaching and Examination in the Shadow with ChatGPT, and that's something which we have had some time to think about.
Sorry.
I have a bad sound.
Yeah.
Should I stop my sound instead?
No, you.
Then we need to mute you so that there's no. Hello.
Oh, we can
Are you
use
using
here.
I think we tried. It did say Creston instead of Logitech. If you go to the arrow. Okay, it says
Yes. Better now?
Now it should work better.
Is it better? Okay, that's it. Okay, so the title of the presentation is Teaching and Examination in the Shadow with ChatGPT, and it's a little bit what we could think about having the robot friend helping us with everything, including doing the examinations, of course. And my sub question is who is cheating? And I also came up with the idea about teaching in the wild, because there seems to be kind of a well, everybody does the way they think during lectures and so on. So we have a bit of a chaotic situation when we teach. And for those who don't know me already, my name is Lars Oestreicher, and I'm at the BI3 department, working mostly with research on impairments and disabilities. And I'm also teaching courses in non-exclusive design, as it's called, which is will be a part of the presentation here, and also 2 courses in user interface programming, which is also included in the discussion we will hear here. So let's get on with it. I'm having a problem here because I don't have any preview now when I show my screen, so I had to run it from the cuff of my shirt in some way. So let's see here. Okay, just to change that way. Okay, so the question is a little bit to think about back. How do we teach in a general sense? I mean, there are a lot of alternatives, of course. We have lectures, we have lessons, we have tutorials, we have assignments and projects, and the standard types of teaching. And then we have alternatives. Problem-based learning was hype some time ago. We have the flipped classroom type, and there are probably quite a lot of other alternatives that I haven't tried on myself or seen. So just to give you a background on how what my perspective is, my teaching started in 1987, I think, and I kept on merely doing the same thing, tried to change things over time, but it sort of stayed in some kind of a similar way. But I have also changed a little bit now in the last, I would say, years, maybe 5-10 years, starting to think about if there are differences, and we're going to see a bit more why that is, why I started to do these changes. That was also before we had the problem with the chatbots, but that will actually have some implications also for the current situation when we have these kind of support or barriers, depending on the view you have. So the question is, what do we teach? And when I started to think about this slide, I started thinking, actually, how often do we think about what we teach? I mean, of course, the topic is clear, but what do we think about the knowledge that we want to do? What is the knowledge from a certain course? What is the thing we want the student to have after the course? And of course, the main question is, does the student learn anything at all? Or are we just talking out of the blue, out in the blue or something like that? What do they learn? That's another question. Are they learning the things we want them to, or are they learning other things which might be peripheral or maybe things they sort of not really the central topics? And of course, the interesting thing might also be, how long do they remember what they have learned? I guess most of you are here have some courses that you've had at the university level. And the question I would always think is, if you think about a certain course, what kind of knowledge do you still retain after 10, 15, 20, 40 years? And the question is, of course, is that the good information? And the question is, what do they remember? And finally, of course, the interesting idea is, how can we know what the students pick up from the things we teach? In the paper, I have one of those typical pyramids, which looks at factual knowledge. We're going to go through that a little bit. We have about, I would say, contextual knowledge and also understanding, coming up to synthesizing of information as being different levels of learning. But if we go one step further, we can actually have a look about how do we examine. And just to start that, I have my personal, we'll see that in a little while. I have a very large amount of ADHD as my personal feature. And without the medication, this is really my situation when I've had a big exam for a large course. I have those, I mean, it's normally just one pile of papers, but it's quite high. But in my mind, it grows to a huge mountain of things that have to be corrected within a certain time. And if you know anything about this variation of cognitive variation, you know that this is actually something we push towards the end. And when you don't really have any possibility of pushing it further, that's when you start and you sit the whole night through, which is sort of every time I have an exam. If you recognize yourself, I feel sorry for you because I know what it's like. But we have written exams, we have assignments, we have projects, we have home exams. Most of these actually produce some kind of assessment situation, which can be more or less difficult to handle for the teacher or teacher assistant, so on. And the common problem, I think, is what can we examine? What kind of information can we find or assess in our examinations? If we want to know that they have really understood something, we might have to use essay questions. And essay questions are horrible, mostly because we don't really want to read 50 of those in a row and sort of you get quite bored about it. But also they take a lot of time. And we have heaps of written documents regardless, unless you have it on a computer, and then you can have it sort of corrected. But to get very if you have lots of questions on an exam, you have to make the very simple questions that might be simple to answer in some ways in order to actually get the idea down. So there's also one more problem coming in, and it has become more and more, I would say, relevant as a problem, and that's cheating. There's been a big discussions, or actually lots of discussions around and papers about how can we, what does cheating with the chatbots actually mean, or are we cheating when we use the chatbots? How can we actually prevent the students from using the chatbots? Because cheating is a sort of, we don't really want people to cheat. And I followed the discussions a couple of times in the different fora and so discussions. And the question I think about is, if cheating is simple, doesn't that mean that the teaching and examination is not suitable? I have my math teacher in college she said, she told about when she was at university, and she had one teacher at the university who allowed them to have a cheating form. It was the size of a normal postcard, and you could write anything you wanted on that card. That had the impact that actually everybody tried to write as small as possible to get as much as possible on it, which, if we think about cognitive psychology and learning strategies, meant that when they had the exam, they knew everything on the card because they have put such much time into putting it down on the card. So the cheating in turn became a learning device, which I think is quite that's all been a part of my in my back of my head when I do my teaching. See, how can we actually increase the learning and decrease the examination load, both on the student and on the teacher. Now, the question is then, is it cheating to use the chatbots for writing exams? Well, yes, it would be. If you don't write down exactly what they say, and if you're not critically reading what they say, because they might be quite wrong in some cases. But you also have other types of examination, not least thesis writing. Is it cheating to actually use thesis chatbots for the thesis writing? I'm not sure. That has to be discussed in some case, but I think it's in some way we have to at least look at that maybe more as if we can actually use it more as a tool to support the students, especially students that might have some problems writing. I've had a student who wrote his master's thesis, and when he turned it in, it was just bullet lists. He was slightly autistic. Actually, he had something called Asperger, which is a high functional type of autism spectrum diagnosis, and he was incapable of writing text. So for his purpose, it would be quite nice to say to the chatbot, can you write this into a sentence that makes sense, or a paragraph or something like that. Now I had to help him because, well, it was big, but it was quite a big interest to see that that kind of student could have big help by these kind of text producing systems if they are used in the right way. And the question then is, can we incorporate chatbots efficiently, both in teaching as in their information sources during the lecturing? I have two courses, as I said, two types of courses. One theoretical course where they are supposed to write a research article, that's the non-extreme design as part of the project, and they have two courses where they make programming projects. And I have actually said that in my courses they can use those sources, chatbots, ChatGPT was the most important one, if they have, with two restrictions. One thing is that they acknowledge that they've used it, and the second is that they can show me that they understand the code that they get from the chatbots. So they have to declare what is going on in that code. And I think that's part of learning in some way. The other solution is, of course, that they go to different places like Stack Exchange and so on. But it's essentially that is the same thing if they actually pick the code from there. So in some way, I think we have a problem if we sort of disallow the use of chatbots in teaching and in different kinds of examination sources. If we sort of neglect that, it actually could be a good support. On the other hand, then, how can we guarantee that they learn anything if they could have a whole program written by the machine and then get over it that way? So we have a bit of a problem here, of course. But essentially, what I'm proposing here is to see if we can also change the teaching and not least the examination in a way that makes it more difficult to, I would say, glide through the course without doing any work, which is, of course, the thing. And of course, we also want to have a good understanding of what they came out with as a learning objective. So the question for me is, why do we examine? And this is a bit of an ironic slide, I have to say that. The things around that guy is money. And in some cases, students have become money for the universities. So one way is to think about examination is to measure that we actually have students that get out there and get out as many as possible, and in some way to assess the knowledge. The question then is, of course, what kind of knowledge are we checking? In many cases, it becomes a memorizing study. How can they memorize different concepts, different ideas, different ways of explaining things? But do we really understand if they have understood what they're talking about or what they're writing about? And of course, sometimes we use this to try to understand what they have not learned, but still it's quite often factual knowledge that we talk about. Of course, this is a very generalized statement, but to many courses, I think this applies still. The other part of that is to make them stressed out. I myself have also a history of burnout, which means that I understand the problem, and I think we have a problem coming up, not least from college times, where very young students will be already very, very stressed out when they come into the student, and failing 1 or 2 exams doesn't make the situation better. So one thing that is interesting is to start thinking, why do we have levels in grading? Why do you have to actually say that someone has passed very well and not? Why not say that, okay, we put the pass order a little bit higher? Because sometimes when you think about I have to do some pass level, and when I think about it, they're not really good. They're not really, I wouldn't really want to pass them but they have the numbers that are sufficient and so on. And the last part is, of course, that if you have a student passing the course, then that's a valuable asset that we can actually get some money for and keep the things, the machinery going. So let's start from another angle. This is a little bit my pyramid, but it's on the other way around. Facts is, of course, the base of what you learn in a course. You have to learn quite a lot of separate pieces of knowledge, chunks of information. And in order to actually do something with it, you have to understand what these different chunks are doing in the context. So actually contextualization, understanding how the thing goes together. And the next level will be to connect the dots and make sure that you have a whole system that you will see within this course that you're working with. And hopefully, in the end, you will actually get to this time when the student will be able to synthesize the ability, transfer the knowledge to other areas, or refine the knowledge that they have into new knowledge that is maybe above the thing they've already learned. So in a way, this is my point of view, the level 4 in this case is my favorite, sort of my goal when I do some teaching. I want people to be able to transfer the knowledge to new areas. I want them to be able to actually make new knowledge and to contribute to the knowledge sphere after the course. Now, and that goes also for the lower level courses, the user interface programming courses. They are both on non-advanced level, basic level, I'm sure it's called. So, sorry?
Undergraduate or bachelor's?
Bachelor's level, yes. So they're not advanced in that sense, but I still want them to be able to do something new with the information they have. Okay, so if you recognize this from either end, it's this hopeless situation that you sit there 5-6 hours and have to write down exactly everything you know. And as you know, the memory is not that. I usually ask my students to tell me everything you know, starting with the letter A, and then go through the alphabet, and they don't really know how to do that, of course. Memory is a very difficult thing, and under stress, and if you're tired, the level of memory, it becomes much more difficult or lower. So in a way, I would say that this is actually, if you go through an academic education for 5 years, you spend quite a lot of number of very wasted hours, because it's just relating information that you should really know. There's no learning involved in this. I'll get back to that. There's no real learning in that. You just in the best case, you could say it's a repetition of things you've learned. So that gets stuck a little bit more, but it's quite seldom that you do some real learning during these examination areas. You disagree?
I disagree.
Yes, I'll come back to that. So the funny thing is, this year I asked my students, what is it you remember best from the course on something afterwards? And the thing they said is, all the stupid errors I made on the exam, I'll never forget them. And that goes back, I can still remember things I did in elementary school. That was errors I made. I remember that the error, and I also remember what was the correct answer. So the problem is there that once you learn those things after having a graded exam, is it doesn't really count to what you have learned, because you have knowledge that you have learned, but it's not in the grading. Actually, you failed those parts. So it really isn't sort of counted in some way. Just a small note for that part. So let's go back then. I just made a search. Here are my 5 most important articles. And you can see they are even summarized. Very nice papers, journals. Behavior and information technology is very nice. I have some co-authors as well. And all these articles are really very good suggestions for what I should write. But they don't exist. They don't exist even though they are listed with pages. This is ChatGPT's answer to my question. And it points to one of those big problems we have when we start using these kind of sources for information, namely that it's quite often that they do most of the things right, but not completely. So they miss in small details, which means that the information they provide is actually quite dangerous if it's the wrong way. So this is ChatGPT who tells me that. So in a way, one thing that we have to start working with is the idea of critical thinking, to put that more into the teaching. And I think that could be something which is good in some way for the students to actually learn that the chatbots are not providing you with the truth. And put this into some kind of context for the students. And why is that? Well, I think it's because, in a way, I think we could use the chatbots in a better way. Chatbots in this case are essentially the thing we had for Google a little bit later ago, but a little bit more expanded. It's the I am lucky. I feel lucky. You get one answer, and that's suggested in such a way that you think that's the right answer in some way. But if you know how to search Google, then you know that being lucky is not a good idea anymore. And you don't really find the right things exactly as the first hits. You maybe have to ask things over and over again. And for the chatbots, it is actually that in many cases you have to, if you ask the same questions 2 different times, you get different answers, slightly different answers, but in some cases, the answers are actually different in one place, where they are wrong in one case and right in one case. So the use of those is, of course, dangerous in that case, which means that we can't really put everything in they will not replace us teachers, I would say, for quite some time. I have to also acknowledge here that I don't really consider chatbots to be intelligent. They're just very, very advanced, I would say, extender of language in some way. They can actually give you good continuations of things that you ask for, but essentially it's not really intelligent, not yet at least. So my idea then was a little bit to think about how can we start looking at teaching and examination that needs to change. This is just one suggestion that I have implemented in my courses during the last years, it's built on the idea that we could in some way at least increase the idea about how knowing what they know after the course, and also avoid a little bit of the cheating possibilities in this way. So this is my personal problem. ADHD and burnout, which means that administration is difficult. I have memory problems, and everything becomes a large project, including the grading and examinations and starting off courses, and also, of course, the administration of schedules, assignments, all that kind of thing is not really my piece of cake, or actually it's really everything but my piece of cake, I would say. And this is really what I feel like after a course, if you look at the picture, hotline in some cases in a way. So that actually gave me some influence in starting to see, okay, how can we make these changes in the course to make it easier for me to actually manage these kind of courses. And this goes for one theoretical course, which is on advanced level, is 2 programming courses I mentioned before. And obviously everything that I try to do is focused on learning. Of course, teaching, lecturing, so on. The projects are focused on learning. I use reflections after each lecture, which is also focused on learning. Assignments are meant to not ask them for things they already know, but to do new things that they haven't done before, make sure that they try it out. And of course, examinations, try to make sure that that also is a learning experience in some way. So this is not a one-step process, of course. This has taken sort of shape over a number of years. But essentially, I think that the reflections are a very good thing for me also, as we shall see here. So the ideas are that you have oral examinations instead of written examinations. Now, this is of course, could be a scalability problem. But at least for me, it's no huge pile of exams to grade. The students get feedback immediately, and I can focus the oral examination on how they understand the topic rather than asking for details. The reflections are used as an immediate repetition for students, which will improve their learning. There's also continuous course evaluation. I can see after each lecture if there is some big misconceptions or if there's anything that I missed or so. And I can also look at individual students, see if there's anything that needs to be corrected in some way. I have a continuous, rather than having supervision possibilities, fixed times for it, I have a calendar where I have open hours for supervision, which means that they can actually come and get supervision when they need it, rather than waiting for a certain time when I have it. And the funny thing is that I have less hours for supervision when they have to use it this way than if I had to block hours and sit there and wait for no one to come. Which is an interesting reflection too for me. The lectures are starting from theory and then focusing on practical examples and anecdotes to sort of exemplify the theory. Many of them are in the beginning, and then the lectures are concentrated at the beginning, of course, and they are also then more focused towards they are less of them towards the end of the course. Assignment projects also given practical applications of the theory and real problems. They should write a real research article. You take the template from Kai, and they're also creating real applications that work in the programming courses. So it's all trying to make sure that they have a connection to something which they could feel engaged into in some way. They are actually doing in the non-excluding design course, they actually do quite interesting articles, which are really good. Some of them I even thought of helping a little bit and then adding them to one thing because they're on that level. So this is a little bit trying to find the level of so you have the theory, you have the support, you have the practice part, and then at the end the examination is almost all of it is I would say theory oriented, the understanding of the project. So lectures focusing on theory, forced repetition, discussing problems, solidifying the theory with practice, and then addressing difficult issues as assignments. And this examination will be a longer assessment, also through learning during the time. Hopefully, that will also be, I think, as I said, I have the experience after the examination that I actually feel that this is a fair assessment also afterwards. I've had very, very few complaints about the procedure or what happened. But chatbots then, well, it's very much about cheating when you have a discussion about chatbots in lecture. And how can we stop students from using ChatGPT to cheat? That's one of those big things. Now, what I found is that maybe we should make these kind of educational things that make sure that we use the technology in a good way. Educate about how to use it, be sure about having the critical thinking about the results, and also examine according to the understanding rather than remembering. There's nothing as useful as the aha moments. And the interesting thing, I had people on these examinations where they actually give a wrong answer first. And then we discuss the answer a little bit like, are you sure you mean this? And then they start thinking about it and they say, ouch. Okay, yes, I should have answered this instead. I'm sorry. But now they have the knowledge. Now they learned it. They learned it through the examination, which means that you could have that kind of examination and they get the immediate feedback, which also strengthens the whole thing. So this aha experience is actually quite important for the learning process. The oral examinations then, that's the sort of focus part. I like to see that as an academic dialogue. We have a problem now, of course, since we have so many students compared to when universities started, that you could have a one-on-one teaching. But something is, in this case, the examinations through a discussion is actually quite telling on how much the students have learned and what level they have learned the things on. They have to discuss this with me. You also can see that in some cases they do synthesize knowledge, and by telling that you could actually do this, they could even ask questions to the exam. Can you do this? And we could discuss that as a certain idea. And they also learn from making the errors and correcting them during the exam. And I think that's one of the best learning methods. Making errors and then not being too badly hurt by them is quite a good thing. And in the end, it also turns out that it's very difficult to cheat. You don't have the time to ask the chatbot for the answer because you're having this in a very real-time dialogue. And also, what should they ask? Because you're discussing different things, different topics all the time. So it's really, I think it's very good. For me, it works quite well to have these kind of sessions. So the question is then time. How long time does it take? And it doesn't take that much time, actually, if you know your topic, if you know what you're teaching. I feel most of the cases I have 15 to 20 minutes. I have some quite good, even for the grading level, pass or no pass, and pass with distinction, etc. And when I compare that to how long time it takes to grade a written exam with the same kind of knowledge, understanding or getting, it's actually almost as long time. It's not that big of a difference. Still, it requires some time management. If you're going to have individual oral examination, it means you can't have them all at the same time, of course. So the examination time will be about a week or maybe two, depending on how large courses are and how many teachers are teaching or teachers you are in the course that could do it. But it's the interesting thing is that they don't have to take the exam. They also book the exam times themselves. So they book them when they feel they are ready. And some people, they book a very early time, and some people book a very late time because they feel very happy. So it's also an individual differences that you can do there, which is so I have the idea that generally you can lead the camel to the water, not force it to drink. But if you have seen a camel coming out of the desert with the puckles on the side and the drink, they sort of just blow up and almost into little proportions. They can't hide that they have been drinking, which I think is the idea here too. And on the camel side is what you see is what you get. Again, this lovely old way of thinking. So the question is, does it work? And it does. I have had courses with up to 90 students in one course and had these kind of oral examinations. It takes some time, it takes some energy, but I think in the end, if you compare that to grading 90 exams, the time or the energy expended is not such a big difference. Also, you do it stepwise. You don't have to do them every one at a time, so you can actually go one person at a time. And my idea would be that if you're going to climb this wall, why not have pass and fail rather than having these kind of grades? Because the grades are sort of to me, it's a big problem to have the grading in levels. I know that some people think it's a good thing, so it's not a big thing for me, but I think it's, if we look at having the students understand what they're doing, rather than learning lots of facts and sort of repeating them, I think that's sort of a different type of learning, which means that most of the students actually go up to a good understanding. in some way. So there are very few students who, there are students who fail. There are students who have grade 4, the students have grade 5, but the 3 is not that often. Because if they actually passed it with the intention that we talk about the evaluation like that, they actually have gone a bit further than they need to. One extra problem we have in the
Sorry, Lars,
so, yeah.
comments there, Mats, maybe you can put them on. I think Lord is saying, but TechNet does not allow, I think we need to take this. Yeah,
Technical doesn't allow us.
no, I know. I'm not talking that we should change it that way, but I mean that's when you look at how the information, the knowledge that you can examine is how that is graded. I had just to give you some idea that it's very difficult to assess from the exam papers what the grades are, because you have to in some way go down to having points per question, which means that in some cases you have to pass a person who maybe is not really passing because they have all the numbers, but they have made strange answers to some questions, which is very difficult. I'm not sure if everybody recognizes that, right? No.
We did exams where they did not give them points.
Okay.
Which made the students crazy.
Yeah, that's
But we made exams so we took all the learning goals from the course, and they had 2 questions for each goal. And if they have passed, for example, this goal, then it was a tick here. And so they could not pick points,
no.
to reach. So they were actually.
That's good. Yeah. That's a good way to do it as well if you have written exams.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't say that everybody does the same thing, but I mean, in my way, it would be a little bit like focusing on understanding and go for the higher levels rather than having people who pass where they are sort of maybe not really good enough, we're saying. So that's one thing. But I know that there are probably quite a lot of what you call it, formal barriers also to doing this kind of changes. So
yeah. I think it's fun because if you really wanted to be snooty, you could just put the 5 be at the pass level, and then you don't give out any 4s, you don't give out any 3s, and then everything is fail.
yeah.
It's one way of getting around this 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, but then you have the revision coming after you. So why do you have only 5 grades in your course?
Do you think so?
Oh, yeah.
Would it be?
Yeah.
And then you say, yeah, but these were the students that were 5 and everyone else failed.
Yeah. Also, I have to say that I always record the oral examinations to have to be able to go back, so I can always motivate the grades afterwards.
And that's okay since it's not used for research.
No, it's just I always inform it about it too.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's
You
good.
can't use it for research.
No, I want this to research.
I just want to double check that all of this is audible in Zoom. Like, can they hear more than Lars? I think so.
It usually works.
Yeah.
Nobody protests. Can you hear everything that people says here?
Yes, I'm hearing you fine.
Okay, good.
Thanks so much.
So
Just you have this discussion about mastery grading.
Yes.
It's very much like what you talk about,
mhm.
and I think maybe you should take time to discuss that now. But I think that could be another topic to really bring up, and also what you can check with a written exam is certainly not what the course is supposed to be about. We have lots of issues with examination. Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, essentially, the idea also that this is just a side note, and it works to have this grading session that you can actually grade them for all 3 grades. But it would ideally probably be to have a higher pass level and then actually having people striving for it. Now, the courses we have in programming are actually just 5 credit courses, so they're very small.
But I mean, in our programming courses during the first 2 years, we assess everything orally, 5, 6 assignments per course, and sit down 15-20 minutes with each student group 5 times during the course. And it's not a problem.
Yeah. I've had 300 plus students doing oral examination.
Yeah. I mean, it's workable.
Yeah.
So still, it's really
But not the final exam, and we can talk about that later, because I think people are more interested in the chatbot than in how people do their courses.
So yeah, but I mean, yeah, I think the examination is always a sort of a hot potato when you come up to discussing it. So that's hard. But I have found that really it works quite well for both programming courses and theoretical courses to have these kind of discussions, and also to get to this kind of I'm not sure if this was given to me when I asked for a teacher and a student with a cup of coffee. So I'm not sure, but it looks a little bit suspicious in some way, I would say that. But the good thing about having these oral exams is that actually you can have a good chance of knowing the students, even if you have just a very short course. You have to talk to them individually, and you get something for the face and so on. And I think it's quite useful for many cases. Sometimes you have people who wants to say, is this a good person? Could you give a recommendation to this person? And I may have had them in 3 courses, my written exams, and I don't know who they are almost. They made good grades, but apart from that, I don't know. Now I know a little bit more about how they think, what they do, etc., etc. And in a way, I think both the student and the teacher can have a better feeling after the course, that you really feel that you have been seen during the course in some way, especially for people who are slightly introvert or slightly shy. That could be one of those things. So essentially, why is this a good thing? I think this is the reason I think talking about oral exams is actually, I think this is one of the best ways of ignoring the possibilities to cheat with these artificial agents, AI agents, while still being able to do a good course where they can even use these sources for information as learning tools. I think that's sort of the double part of it. So my general sense is that it's really not, I would say, we shouldn't really shy or try to prohibit the use of these tools. They're getting better and better. Now, I'm talking about ChatGPT 4, but I mean, now we have Bing and I'm not sure what the other one is. Bard.
There are
Bard.
many different,
Yes,
some
and
very
they,
specialized.
yeah, and some of them are even trying to do a combination of text generation and search functions. So we'll be more and more in this kind of technical niche. We'll have to decide how to treat these things.
But I mean, there are also chatbots that are designed to be more like study buddies that are actually helping you in your studies, explaining problems, how to approach problems, how to solve them, and so I mean, it's just software.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but but there's, if you look at some of the educational fora, they're very much into how can we actually manage to make sure that they don't use these to do these things. And I think that's a strange way. It's a bit of a difficult way to go, especially when we talk about people with special needs. In many cases, we can have quite good use of it. So this is almost the whole presentation. I have a paper. If you are interested to see the more details on it, I can send it out. So just write me a small letter, short letter, and ask for it. The conference is in mid-October, so I think it's a pretty okay to actually give a preview. I hope so. If you don't talk too loud about it, then that probably is okay. Don't tell anyone else, right? What to say. And I have one acknowledgement to do, and that's the illustrations. They are all made with Midjourney, which is an artificial intelligence art generator.
Nice.
So that's also in some way showing a way where you can actually use the AI art generators for a useful purpose, as a side note for the rest of the presentation. So, questions? Oops.
I have
Lots of questions.
lots of questions.
Yes.
But maybe we should first say that if anyone online has a question, please raise your hand in Zoom and we will try to moderate that, I guess. I keep track of everyone here, yeah.
We knew it. I can see that you knew it because it's very typical.
So we had a teacher day for the IT and CS bachelor program yesterday.
Yes.
And one of the topics that we discussed was how these kind of tools are going to affect their teaching and assessment. What we agreed on there is that it's kind of sad to focus on the bad things, on the possibilities of cheating, and because I mean this is a tool that, or a class of tool that is here to stay.
Yes.
And all these drawbacks that you mentioned about ChatGPT, that it's sometimes lying and such. I mean, there are newer versions that don't have those problems. There are specialized chatbots that are actually doing fact checking and stuff like that. So I think the big question is, how should we take advantage of this technology? How should we make this beneficial for the students, but also for the teachers? And I mean, a good start would be, I think, if the university or the faculty or someone, I see there are some prominent people here in the participants list, if they're listening and not just zoned out. I mean, it would be really nice if you had like an enterprise license for some of these chatbots, so we can actually, because I know lots of teachers are paying privately to use this in the research and teaching. It costs $20 per month per person. I know that students are using it a lot. I talked a lot with students about how they're using it, and I think they're using it in very constructive. I mean, it's not at all only for cheating. They use it in good ways. So I think this is an area where we need to be proactive, and I think a good start would be to have access to the technology. And
That's what I mean. I mean, in a way, that's what I mean.
Could we respond to this first before you take the points?
Well, I'm not going to.
I think Lars wanted to respond.
Yeah.
Yes, and I want to respond.
You can take the phone first.
Okay, so I have two comments on this, and the first is that you represent this paper in US,
Yes.
where cheating is a much bigger thing, because I do think that many people, personally, I totally agree with you there, but cheating is a much bigger thing in US. Student cheating,
Oh, yes.
and things like that. And the second thing is that your paper, if I may have opinions here, you have very many foci.
Yeah.
And
But I think the presentation is more.
Your presentation had very many foci.
Yeah, the paper is
And,
more.
and
more.
Personally, I believe that the US people would be interested in cheating, but very many people would be more, if you focus more on how you use ChatGPT than on oral presentation. Thing is about oral presentation, we have done this for years, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
Exactly.
Reflections also. I wrote a paper about it 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we have done this with
as long.
Yeah.
So.
300 students, and I have lots of, experience of good and bad things about that.
Yeah.
So my recommendation was to this is what I believe, that people would be really interested in how you use chat and to promote the idea that it's good and why and so on.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, what you said here also, I think the main idea with the paper is exactly what you said, to try to make sure that we use it as much as possible, actually.
That doesn't come through so much in the
Not in the
presentation.
presentation.
Yeah,
So I'll try to focus on that.
Because you need to shorten it anyway, right?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
someone also.
Yes.
My comment there.
There is something about cheating may.
Not
Well,
big.
cheating may not be bigger in the US, but
Yes.
perhaps it's important to focus on learning and ensuring students understand how to reference technology resources.
Sorry, I don't mean that students cheat more in the US.
No.
That was came too wrong.
It's a bigger problem.
Yeah, no,
It's a bigger thing.
No, I think people are more interested in stopping cheating.
Yeah.
Than we are.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, so I think students in Sweden and US cheat as much. Sorry for sounding as. Yeah.
But I think the critical thinking is probably where you could focus a little bit more. Because, I mean, this is feedback on your presentation.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of where this become quite interesting. And of course, we get to the oral examination part, because that's one way of knowing something about the critical thinking.
Yeah.
Because you can still use the inner boxes to sound like you're a critical thinker. And so that said, on November 13, we're going to have more or less a full day on trying to look at what kind of competencies should we try to teach or get our students to get in order when we have tools. And like the critical thinking is typically part of that. I mean, they need to be better at critical thinking, Because when you're using tools like this, as you illustrated, there is a danger. There is and we need to rethink again, what are we examining? So if you're trying to block November 13th for an interesting day, we have some really good people coming here.
But to be illustrated.
I think Jake is sort of
Yeah, okay.
responding
Shipping, yeah.
from, I can't say how important it is to stop it either in each country.
Yeah.
I mean, we have had this discussion previously, but on copying. Where in some cases, in some places, it's almost okay to copy text and you reuse it.
Yeah, if you know,
And if you have
to copy, I mean.
Yes, but I mean, so I mean, in a way that I think the discussion itself is very important.
Yeah.
And I have one thing about you saying that you have better and better chatbots. I think that's actually making them more and more dangerous because you get less and less aware of that there might be something which is wrong. In the end, so in a way that if they're bad, people check facts out more often.
Yeah, but students are aware of this. I mean, my students, at least when I talked about them, then say that when they get answers from ChatGPT or similar, that they are more skeptical towards that compared to when finding something on Stack Overflow or something.
Right.
But one thing, this is maybe a little bit provocative question, but I mean, what we want students, when we ask students to write text, it's we want them to be able to produce text that's possible to digest and understand something. Is it really that bad if they use AI in the production of that text as a tool? Because I mean, there are so many ways you can use ChatGPT without it being considered cheating, to proofreading, to restructuring text. And I mean, if we want them to produce text, I mean, who are we to say what kind of tools they are limited to be using?
I think I said so.
Yeah.
I think I actually said that in the
Yeah.
presentation that, I mean, for some people, it might be the tool that will help them actually to do something, even if they're not linguistically sort of good. If they don't have, I mean, if you have some people who they know how to write Swedish maybe or English, but they don't know how to write fluent or so, and reading those theses are horrible because I get stuck all the time on those small things that are not good. So I definitely think that we could use them in this way, but I think it also requires them to make sure that they understand what they are writing, so to say.
And also the students need to take ownership of the text that they are submitting. They can't just say something that say that, okay, they can't say that, okay, if there are any bugs in the text, I blame ChatGPT. But when you submit something, you submit it, it's your responsibility.
Again, we have a Mats Kullhed. You want to?
Oh yeah, he's raising some.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the presentation and thank you for a very enjoyable discussion. I had a couple of points or observations. I'm not at all sure. Someone else said the same thing, that more students will cheat with AI. I do think that the more dangerous thing is that the limit between legitimate and illegitimate use of AI might be blurred. So that is a responsibility which we have as teachers to really, in our teaching and in the task that we give to students, that we provide them guidance and not only say, tell them this is where the line goes between legitimate and illegitimate, but also why it is legitimate or illegitimate. We must be able to explain it to them. I like your points that you wish your students to do things. You have two requirements. Use of AI must be acknowledged, which is good, and then they must understand the output, the result they have got. Very, very, very nice, those two things. And then this understanding point, which we need then to do, whether we do it orally or in any other way, we need to test whether they have understood it. So this is where the critical thinking come in. And when it comes to writing essays and learning through writing, I would say, and I've seen it in the debate, that with AI, critical thinking becomes this generic academic skill, or critical thinking becomes more and more important. So we should introduce this more explicitly in our teaching. We should have courses in critical thinking and discuss critical thinking and so on. And that may be fine, but I would also say that we need to tell the students that one of the best ways of learning to think critically is by yourselves producing texts which you have to be able, you have to understand them, you have to be able to understand them, you have to be able to explain the choices you have made. And that is where I think it may go wrong if students too readily accept answers provided by AI. We have mostly, of course, been talking about ChatGPT and these large language models. Of course, this picture, I think, will be altered now as ChatGPT has been built into Bing search, and Google is building Google's Bard into Google search, which means that now they will actually be looking for existing sources instead of those hilarious false references which you found, Lars. So then they'll get answers from the internet with pages which in principle are possible to control. But we need really to, yes, you may use AI as a tool, but if you really wish to learn to think critically, you will also need to write text yourself. I would like to say that.
Points out here, I mean, critical thinking means a little bit different in different contexts. And it's not just about understanding is this right or not. It's thinking critically in kind of, is this meaningful or something like that?
I think there's a physical hand raised, and then we have several here. So Mats, I don't know if you're moderating. But...
Well,
I have a participation sense.
Oh, sorry, it was your hand that was up. Sorry,
hand was up, yes.
Okay, now I know.
Can I just answer to you? I think you're completely right there. That this is a changing. We are now on marsh. We have to step carefully to see which way we want to go, and I think that's one of the things. And we have to start thinking about how to do this in a more systematic way as well. I mean, I would like to have the whole department agreeing on how we should use this in our courses. The reason I put my literature search there is that it is actually a very good example on why these generative systems don't work for some cases, because what it does there is to actually find a good structure. It's the article name, the author, the title, the year, it's the article, it's the volume, etc., including the pages. But these numbers, they don't have any pattern in themselves. They could be just any pattern because they're not multiplied. They're not sort of generated over and over. It's just the pattern that is multiplied. So that is why it's quite interesting to have that as an example on when these kind of systems fail. That's why I'm
just make it very short.
Yeah.
I read a book once. Going on a moped in Europe or something like that. And this guy was in Italy and he asked for directions, and the people said, oh, you should go and do this. And then he went there and it was not right, and he got back and he found these people again. Why did you tell me when you didn't know? We wanted to make you happy. And I think that's kind of what ChatGPT sometimes does. Making you happy.
It's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I want to comment on Boris' comment there and another thing, because when I have novice programmers, it's not sufficient to ask them to explain the code, because they can be able to explain the code perfectly, but if you ask them to change the while loop or for loop, they can't do it, because they have never heard of that. So that is in line with what Boris said. Another thing that, because I haven't read your paper, is that if you check this up, Anders Berglund has done some very interesting research of what do we mean by cheating in different cultures.
Sure, yes.
And on the FA conference, there were people from all over the world. So cheating, they will not think about the same thing when you say cheating.
No, I know, and I think that's it's one of those dangerous.
Yeah, so maybe that's something you can bring up that you know about this.
Yes, talking about it. But let's say, I'll tell you a comment to you first. That was with the
novices.
The novices. I can say that. No, never mind. Go.
Okay. So one aspect that you didn't include, but that I find very interesting and fascinating about this kind of chatbots is how they're being trained and the ethical aspects of that, because the vast majority of the big chatbots are trained on data from the internet produced by, well, the average producer is a middle-aged white American. And I mean, they have done studies and found how this is reflected into the answers that you get from the chatbots. And I think this is a thing that we could raise also with the students, like what kind of personality does this chatbot have? What kind of values and political statements and everything are behind the data that it's been trained on? And I think that's a very interesting discussion also. If you're going to teach students to think critically about this, we also need to think about where does the input come from.
No, I remember what we really need to think about what do we want to learn as well.
Yeah.
So I mean that's
What is the reason for teaching in some way? I was thinking about that, what you said there now. When you said that asking them to change to loop to for loop to while loop, for instance, yes. And that's a big difference if you ask them to do it in writing. But if you do it during the oral examination, you can see that this is really not, they just repeat the words. It's fairly easy to see that. I can tell you that.
That's not my experience with thousands of students.
No, but I found that in some cases, they actually have used it and they have.
I
they
think
know
you have more
words.
advanced students than I have, because I have the real novices.
I have both.
Okay, good.
That was not negation. I have students who come from the IM department and they don't have any programming at all to start with. And those are quite easy. They can really show that if they try to explain something in the programming, they can sound very convincing, but you can see quite quickly that they were not.
What's IM?
Information and media.
Media, that's from the
Social science, yes.
Very useful.
More questions?
But this is also interesting. I mean, I had discussions with ChatGPT about code that I uploaded and said, let's discuss the efficiency of this code. Is this scalable? Is it good? Is this good programming practice?
Right.
And it can be very interesting to have discussions on code quality with these kind of tools. And I think students can learn a lot from that also.
I use ChatGPT quite often for programming tasks when I want to do those things. We have to implement a user interface with hundreds of buttons or something like that, and you don't want to write the code for it. Yeah. So you write the code, it might not do it perfectly, but you get the structure and then you can put it in.
I think one of the things also talking about like the exams, like, you know, you sit and you waste hours in exams. I think exams are really not aligned with industry, at least in our domain in computer science. Like I've never heard of a job where you go somewhere and you have to sit down and write something in 5 hours. Unless you really waited to the last day. But I think that it's also like the coin has been tossed, but we don't know if it's heads or tails as to whether or not these tools are going to be incorporated into industry at scale. So I think here at the university, it's kind of, you know, we're kind of waiting to see like if these do become really popular in the industry, then we'll have to teach them. Definitely. Because that's what the industry will expect that they have experience with going out. So it's.
We're actually we're starting a project with Robert and Roger McDermott in Scotland and Alison and Tony Clear in New Zealand, where we're gonna try to find people in the industry and ask them what do they use this for and how does it influence their work environment. So, I mean, it's partly answering your question, trying to. Another thing that yesterday we had a presentation in the science education research course where someone was presenting the tool prompt or a study around that, where they had a system who helped the students prompt things from a chat box. And it turned out that some were not really good at doing this. So I think that's an example of a competence that might be needed in the future. How do we actually get something useful out of our chatbots?
Okay, I can say that for chatbots, I mean, as I said, all the pictures here are made by chatbots, by artificial AI agent. And as you said, you can see it. You can actually see that.
Yeah.
And if I would have taken, we'll say maybe one more day of producing the pictures for it. This was just on the fly. I would probably have made pictures that did not burst, that wouldn't be so, I would say, easy to recognize. And what I think, and that's a bit on your side, what is a very important knowledge, if chatbots will be accepted around, is to actually also look at how we should use those, in what kind of prompting.
And what do you need to
something.
know when you
Yeah,
want to
exactly.
good?
Because what I found,
Yeah.
I've been working quite a lot with artificial generation of images. And after, it took me about half a year or a little bit more to be able to say that now I can almost get almost the picture I want with 1 or 2 tries.
Mhm.
And I have used it for instance, to generate pictures for my wife who's working with the children's psychiatry, where pictures are very, very sensitive. You can't use pictures from what's called those open media or so, because they're still real people. So we have to make sure that, so what we have in the presentations normally are sunsets and beautiful pictures, just to sort of, now we can actually show children with anxiety or people who have fear or whatever without having to use it. So by doing this kind of making the prompts the right way, that would be an art form for all things, also for programming, I think. You have to know how to write the prompt if you want to get that.
My immediate reaction is, doesn't it, I mean, going into IT computer science is like this, and people gradually take so many different kind of jobs. So, I mean, all people don't go to Google or Spotify or whatever. I mean, they do a kind of, and then they need quite different competencies, as much would say. So do we need to adjust our education and see where do our students end up? Do you think so?
I would think too, yes.
You
I mean, even what I would say is
Well,
that
at least you should be aware of where
Yeah,
you end up. I mean, it's
what you can see now is that some companies already start to produce the simple texts with these kind of text generators.
yeah, and
So
it's
you want
probably much better than if you look at what you get now when you buy something, where they have the sheets of in different languages, and if you look at the Swedish one, sometimes it's horrible.
It's often it's horrible.
But I mean, here is the challenge for us as a university and for teachers. How are we going to teach the students the right skills to use this kind of tools in a responsible way? What I think, or what I know that many teachers in the IT program, at least because we had it yesterday, wants is that we want some support structure from the university, from Central University, from the faculty, maybe from TUR. I mean, and I mentioned before just having access to these kind of tools so we can explore but that's something really, really neat.
We do have some ethical problems here too. I mean,
yeah.
Some people are really saying, should we say that, encourage them to use something where they say, well, this is kind of, people will say, they're using my text in a wrong way. So that's, of course, I mean, what you get there is not, you can't trace it back to a particular person, but many persons have contributed to what you get.
But Google is already there. Or?
Well, I mean, but it becomes even more.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Do you give credits to all authors that have produced texts that have inspired your writing style?
Well, and it's not just that, it's also like, how kind of quick do you get that? Well, what's the basis for this text that has, I mean, how much is coming from areas that sort of obsolete or marginalized, or so I mean, there are a lot of
the bias in the data.
Then we're into the ethical discussion, you know.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah, I mean, like, right, if you would want to like require the use of something like right now, we couldn't require the use of this because it's, you know, you have to sign up and have to have an account, and you have to agree, like I don't think we could impose it. on the students, but I think a lot of students will use it on their own, regardless of the ethical things. So I think especially for the thesis, that we really soon, the department has to have a better stance.
But I mean, I think we should consider having assignments where we explicitly say that, okay, we want you to use
I think so.
these kind of tools for this assignment, and also to include a description on how you used it, what output you got. And so because I mean, we need to train them to use this because the tools aren't going away. This is not a fluga.
No, they're not.
I think the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also like what you said, I mean, this student who wrote a bullet list. I did some reviewing for FIE and got a paper from Saudi Arabia. Typically, they are really hard to read because the English is super bad. But here, it was much better and much clearer what you wanted to get across. And yes, one can wonder how much is really theirs and how much helpful. Well, what happened? But it was a paper that was much more readable, understandable. And if that paper actually mirrors what the authors wanted, then I think it's a good thing.
I think we have that kind of problems. We have had that problems already in many cases. I mean, I was a presentation in Japan where we had a Japanese presenter who held a fantastic presentation in very, very easy to understand English. And there came the questions after. And he couldn't answer. So not because he didn't know, he could answer in Japanese. He didn't know English. So he had just trained the presentation completely without paper. He didn't have any notes or anything like that. He just presented it with that thing. That was impressive. But the question is then, where did he get the translation from? How did it get there? So I mean, it was. I think it was the genuine work because in Japanese you could actually answer the questions on the word. So I mean, but the interesting thing is then where does that language? But I mean, it's a little bit the same thing as we ask someone else to write it for us, so we can just read it.
Yeah, and
that would be.
I guess the point is like, how do we know this is what they take responsibility for us? Is it really what they wanted it to be?
Yes.
And if you go to students, it's the same thing. Did they really understand what they're delivering here? So
what people have said in the chat.
They will say goodbye.
yeah.
They're leaving. Thank you for listening and here.
One of the things I'm waiting for is for someone in some company to use one of these tools for some really important production code thing. And then all of a sudden something's gonna blow up or there's gonna be some
Who's responsible?
security leak or data something, and then the engineer or the software developer is gonna be like, I used this from ChatGPT and I thought it would work, and then all of a sudden.
That's what I mean.
Who is responsible?
The better it gets, the less reluctant will people be to, the more reluctant will people be to actually test it.
I think the more that people use it, the probability of someone coming along to exploit it. If I know that ChatGPT will always have.
But I think what Matt's right here, this kind of like transparency and stuff like that. I still think this would be a very big gray zone because what many people are using this for is to get started, to get something, and then what you actually get down there is partly, of course, kind of inspired or generated from the generative AI thing, but you changed it, you made it yours, you just had it as a brainstorming tool or like a teaching assistant or something like that. And then I think you're getting outside this proposal or.
So I think it would be good if we have Mats commenting on this.
Yeah,
he has done so much work on
That
it.
was exactly what Mats, could you elaborate and tell us more, because I don't know anything about what you are writing here. It sounds interesting.
Yes, I found it just last month. This was from June, I think. There is currently an ongoing debate. There's been no decision yet about an Artificial Intelligence Act. This has been discussed in the European Parliament. I can give you a link to the page. You can read on about it. And among the requirements they put for sort of fair and legitimate use of AI in the future, they have included this specifically for generative AI. The document is wider than only generative AI, that it would have to comply with these basic transparency requirements. I do not know much more about it than this, but I'll give you the link and you can read on about it. Just a sec here, and I'll put it here in the chat.
And then Mats, perhaps you can send it to.
Yeah, and said.
Thank you, Mats.
What I was going to say, which is a bit outside of the topic for this presentation, is that I've been working quite a lot with the different kinds of AI art generators, and the topic there is actually from 2 points. It's very easy to adapt the style of someone, so you can actually easily make pictures that look like Salvador Dali or Magritte or whatever you like, Picasso, and so on. That is not the problem. The problem is actually come up now that you have a lot of modern artists who have been sort of added to the styling part. And those people now, they have actually problems finding their own work, because all the copies that are generated with their style as a generative part of the thing. So that is one of the big problems. Where does this information come from, and how can we find the source of the information that is being published in the art world? It's a very big problem. I'm not sure about how much it would be in a text generative world, that you actually can also find where do you get the information from. I mean, you can always ask them to provide papers, but we should have the information coming from somewhere. And that becomes a big problem, I think, also for the students in some way.
I mean, it was interesting, a related problem was this, this Hollywood strike that we see now, where they have an agreement that movie companies can't use AI to as large extent as possible. They have to hire physical people and specified numbers as such. So here you have a task that could be where you can use the AI quite heavily, but the union has demanded that, wait, we need to have some amount of actually humans involved in the process. Make this work. And I think this is maybe something that we will see in the future in many different.
We have an example in Sweden already.
Yes.
Yes, with this large game manufacturer, electronic game producer, who have laid off, I think, half the staff. And will replace them with AI agents for the generation of levels, sceneries for levels, so the designer. So scene designer and level designer is apparently something they have tucked away, and that really they have really cut it half the number. And good for them if it works. I'm very skeptic. So what they say is that the difficulty is not to actually do the scenery itself; it's to make sure that it's good. And the same thing comes with art and everything like that.
You need just a few persons who will do it, like you said. You train to do, you can do stuff with this and make images really good.
Yes.
So if you have just a few, then probably you can definitely produce good quality with very fewer, a lot of fewer people.
Right.
So,
but still, it's the human who has to decide whether it's good or not.
Yeah, but if you need 5 humans instead of 50 or 100.
I actually made a thought experiment. I was trying to see how far I can get with it. If you have a 100 by 100 pixel array, and then you take just a grayscale, and you let every pixel be every value from 0 to 256 in different constellations, then you have generated all the possible art within 100 by 100 pixels. So there's no need to do any more art, because everything is generated at one point. And I mean, then we have the question here. That's a little bit like the thing here now. We're producing so many images now that it's a plethora. To make it art, you still have to select the ones that are good in one sense, right? So there's still a human need for finding.
Some time ago, so we talked about what we want our students to learn during their educational. So we talked about knowledge, we talked about skills and competences, and we talked about dispositions, right? We had this discussion a few weeks ago in this seminar series. And I think actually this kind of tools is something that we can use to explore all three dimensions of that, both to gain knowledge, to practice skills, but also to train our disposition, how we relate and how we evolve as responsible individuals during our studies. I think this kind of tool can be used in all dimensions if we just use it from different angles. I hope my students will use it a lot, at least.
They will.
They will. They already are. I actually went to a seminar where they had an 8th grader, a girl that was in the 8th grade, that was telling how she is using ChatGPT every day in her schoolwork to support it in a non-cheating way. It was very fascinating to hear how a 13, 14-year-old girl reason about this and use it in a very productive way. So, I mean, this is what we can expect to get here in 5 years. Students that are fluent in ChatGPT.
Well, whatever, I mean, the tools are evolving.
I think in a way we missed that with the Google. Because a long time we have had students who don't know how to make a Google search.
They still don't.
No, I mean, it really requires, it requires, I mean, I haven't had students come ask me, can you find me some information? I can't find any information about this very specific topic. And then I go in my room and I make 2 or 3 searches and I find all the pages they need. I mean, and that's because they don't know how to ask the questions. They don't know where to find. If it's not on the first page, it's not there. Right. So then you have to go to the next page. Maybe
that's when you ask ChatGPT and hope for a good answer.
Yeah. If we find on this Google search on page 5, the 5th line, and it has this title, and then it says, and when you go there, you don't find it because it's just made up.
But I mean, but we are in I mean, it's like we had the summer course, like our way of doing this.
Now that you raise the hand at the same time, so we can go one
yeah,
and then the other.
At the day,
Yes, sorry to interrupt. I have to leave. So I wish to thank you first of all for this really rewarding, amusing, enjoyable conversation. And I hope that you are aware that there is a series of online seminars during this fall term with teachers who are telling how they have been using AI in various ways. Was one last week. There are 4 more to come, and the link which I sent there, you can also search for it in the Medarbetarportalen. Lead to those 4. The next one is in 2 weeks' time, I think. So I hope to see you there. So thank you for today. Thank you, Lars, above all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Tack så mycket för input. Thank you for
Det är
input.
lite en annan sak.
Ja.
På tal om input. Jag tror jag svarade.
Yeah, maybe we could.
Men jag måste sätta ur en liten anteckning. Jag har inte läst ett papper så det här kanske finns med i pappret. Men du hade en bild där